There are different variables in the manner in which we choose our actions. There is this thing called control, and it has its antonyms like anarchy or chaos. No, just talking about emotions here and aesthetics and art. Nothing political, but perhaps politically correct decorum that we go through choosing the action we conclude every time we encounter a crossroad, or as simple as deciding the path we choose between self-control and full-blown candor toward society. In short, impulse is such an easy path to destruction versus having some elegance to hold back. Welcome to Human Thesaurus presents Epitome Anatomy. My name is Wish, a retired tech operator, indie author, cat mom, and self-aware life explorer. Epitome Anatomy is an opinion piece on the power of words and their ethos that I extracted from this life. Ready for the epitome of restraint? Let's go. Our keyword is restraint, focusing on its meaning of the ability to control or moderate one's impulses, passions, etc., according to dictionary.com. The word restraint comes from the early 15th century Old French restrainte, meaning a check or holding back. It derives from the Latin root restringere, combining re, meaning back, and stringere, meaning to draw tight or bind. There is a semantic evolution of the word restraint. In the 15th to 17th century, it is widely used for physical blocks, legal limitations, or stopping actions, such as the quote-unquote restraint of trade concept by the 1630s. Then, in circa 1600s, this word expanded into psychological and social territory, coming to mean the repression of excess, emotional reserve, or style moderation. And in the 19th century, it grew specifically towards clinical associations regarding the confinement of dangerous persons or prisoners. This was around by 1829. Now, in the modern day, restraint represents both physical devices or rules that restrict freedom and the internal virtue of self-discipline. In this episode, we will focus on its semantics in 1600s, focused on repression and moderation. This topic came upon because of my constantly evolving lifestyle and style. I always believe that restraint is an art to perfect or polish. This is a never-ending task. Being aware that you can have restraint in some elements of your life could improve your views or your perception or even of the way you discipline yourself with every single thing that we absorb every single time we encounter different intakes of opinions and processes and views of how we interact with other people or other elements or other items. It's an art form. This is a big thing. Developing restraint as self-control in terms of your actions, opinions, speech, or emotion. The thing that I didn't really like about me is that I'm very, very transparent. You can see in my face if I dislike something or if something piqued my interests or something annoys me. You can easily see, and I do express what I feel on the dot, sometimes without even thinking. So this is the anti-restraint that I do. I normally don't like it, but at the same time, I keep on mulling about it. Why? Why can't I control myself? Why can't I be more opaque about the things that I think or what I feel? I try that many times, especially in my career, but it never works out for me because it's so not genuinely me. I'm restraining myself from being myself, but at the same time, I found the right formula on how and why I do things the way I do them. Yes, I do have self-control. I do imbue professionalism in the workplace, but at the same time, I won't stop myself from being transparent or having feelings being at work. Having the right combination of restraint, of being authentic. I hate that word nowadays because people just misconstrue that word, but you know what I mean. Having all of these combination for me is a strategy. As I mature and grow, I knew for a fact that I could push different buttons in my personality to strategize how I do, how I decide, how I make things work for me or work for my project or work for my team, etc. It's always about results. Whenever I do these things, I never lose being transparent. I am just being true to the ethical portion of my choices. In short, there's a balance there. If you think about it, it's an art on its own because there's some restraint that I make to operate effectively. I think it's still a little bit complex, so I'm just going to have to simplify a little bit. It's more about understanding how you can strike a balance of not losing yourself, having that freedom to choose the choices of how you're going to execute different factors of actions, opinions, of your speech or your emotion. Where are you putting your energy and what result do you want to get out of it? As old wisdom would tell you, you have to think before you speak. It's not my practice all the time, but I think as a more mature person, I can do it better nowadays. It's really about giving in or holding back. There's a certain balance and poise or grace or elegance when it comes to where you want to put your energy so that you can get the right result. Sometimes there are things that we're highly opinionated about. For example, you're in a big networking or social party and you're socializing amongst different people. We think where we stand in the conversation or the topic or the subject that everybody's talking about. There's also an art on how you weave through that topic or contribute into the conversation. And, there are different characters. There are always different characters of people wherever we go to these conversations, even if, amongst your friends or strangers, whoever. And that's where listening comes to play. That's where you can assess, holding yourself back instead of jumping in immediately to give your opinion. Okay, what can I contribute so that this could continue as a healthy conversation? And sometimes it comes to a moot point. It just gets too intense or too boring. You just either bow and do a French exit or do whatever. But I think there's a value in some form of restraint so that you kind of know where to put the right energy at the right purpose. We all go through life thinking about our purpose. For self-aware people, at least, I always try to value, always actively in search for my purpose in life. Therefore, I keep on evolving. So restraint for me is something that I am practicing and I've practiced throughout. And I use it as part of my toolkit to survive without harming my personality and my beliefs. So that's where I'm going to leave that restraint being part of your personality or self-control. When I quoted myself, restraint is an art, I think this was a conversation mostly not even with values. It's about styling. I have mentioned this from my former episode about taste, that I do have certain preferences and I'm always particular with colors and form and all of these. I'm not an avant-garde, but there are some form of my styling wherein everything is intentional. Almost nothing is by accident when it comes to how I carry myself, how I dress, how I put my makeup on at that certain time, what I use, what jewelry or lack of jewelry I've got, and shoes. So there are all intentional. And I tend to experiment. I'm not overly eccentric enough, but I do know how to play around my form, my colors, my shapes. Because they're intentional, there's a form of restraint with what I'm doing in many different aspects of my appearance. No Botox. There's always restraint in everything else that I'm doing because as a very much individual person with self-awareness, I put restraint with all aspects, even with, the aspects of skincare, possessions, food. So speaking of these ones, it kind of irks me looking at social media sometimes. Well, more often, I'm avoiding it nowadays, but there's just an overconsumption. And I think we hear about overconsumption nowadays. For example, self-care. Self-care is being masked by this common misconception about what beauty should be about. And right now, the standard of beauty are fake beauties, all cosmetically manipulated. And that's where it's trying to push us into this perception that that's the standard of beauty nowadays. Overly Botoxed face, overly manipulated beauty. I'm appalled by even calling it beauty. It's not. Sometimes there are deformities and there's a tasteful way on how we could improve the way we look aesthetically, physically. But somehow there's no restraint with a lot of people. And it's so funny because there will be groups of people that the opinion is about they're not beautiful, they just have money. And I think that's really close to the truth. There's no restraint. The way Hollywood or social media is pushing to us what beauty should be all about. Even makeup, it's rage baiting us to see that you need to apply this much makeup for you to look perfect. The extreme of so much makeup they tell you to use for you to look as presentable as these annoying influencers always show us. We just have to self-impose how much of these do we have to draw ourselves in or to get influenced by. Again, going back to all the semantics, all the words that I talked about before, discernment and about taste and what's the thin line on how we have to call upon ourselves. What is the right thing? What is the right fashion? What is the right restraint to conceptualize what beauty should be about? There's a certain form of elegance and restraint when you take a look at yourself and then you can curate. Restraint is such an art form that we have to kind of make our own judgment of what is good for us. You don't need to be a sheep and follow other people, what other people do. There are things like trends. Fuck trends. There's this difference between doing things in moderation or, the negativity of repressing yourself, not being able to express who you are. There are two different types of restraint, and it's up to you. What are you gonna do moving forward on how you're going to blend your sense of self, your sense of fashion and style, your sense of what path you wanted to take on how you will elegantly put yourself. Acknowledging all of these different factors and different elements for different, many different things, then you can develop this restraint and this taste and this proportions or disproportion, chaos or non-chaos. It just gives you a certain point of view. There should always be a balance in nature on when you hold back, when you go all in, when you can go nuts, when you can control or drip feed. These are all measurements. Impulse is another street that we can take, but restraint is something that will give us a better path. What's your take on restraint and your actions in public and private? Why do you hold back sometimes? Please comment. I'd love to hear from you. I have a direct message via text or voicemail on top of each of my episode summaries, so please do reach out. Until next time, ciao! Comment, like, subscribe, and share wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also visit humanthesaurus.co. Epitome Anatomy is produced by me and Jeremiah Ronquillo. Music by Ketsa UK. All rights reserved by Witchbliss Media. Thank you and see you in the next episode.